The name Napoleon Bonaparte would come to define an entire age, an era of military conquest, political upheaval, and radical social transformation. But before he was emperor, before he was the victorious general, before he was even the artillery captain at Toulon, he was simply Napoleone Buonaparte, a boy born on a restless island, struggling to reconcile his passionate Corsican identity with the French nationality imposed upon him. To understand the man who would redraw the map of Europe, we must first understand the intense, formative years that shaped his ambition, his intellect, and his profound sense of destiny. Napoleon was born on August 15, 1769, in Ajaccio, Corsica, a mere 15 months after the island was forcibly annexed by France from the Republic of Genoa. This date of birth is not a footnote. It is a cornerstone of his identity. His family, the Buonapartes, were minor Corsican nobility, a family of Italian origin whose fortunes had dwindled. His father, Carlo Buonaparte, was a lawyer, a charming but financially irresponsible man who quickly adapted to the new French administration, securing privileges for his numerous children. His mother, Maria Letizia Ramolino, was the true center of the family, a formidable, stern, and practical woman whose strength and discipline in raising 8 children through constant upheaval left an indelible mark on Napoleon. She instilled in him the relentless resilience and the stoic endurance that would later define his military campaigns. The defining political reality of Napoleon's childhood was the fight for Corsican independence led by the national hero Paoli Paoli. The Paolists fought bitterly against the French annexation. Though his father, Carlo, eventually sided with the French to protect his family's interests, young Napoleone remained fiercely devoted to the Paolist cause and held a deep resentment towards the French conquerors. He grew up hearing tales of Paoli's patriotic struggle and the French oppression, an environment that bred a young man who felt like an outsider, an alien within the French state that claimed him. This foundational sense of being an outsider would fuel his ambition, driving him to prove his worth to a nation he initially despised. In 1778, at the age of 9, Napoleon was sent to mainland France to begin his education. His father, Carlo, had secured him a scholarship to the Royal Military School at Brienne-le-Château. The transition was brutal.
The young Corsican boy did not speak French well. His native tongue was a mixture of Corsican and Italian. His name, Napoleone, was Frenchified, and his social standing was mocked by the wealthier French aristocratic students who viewed him as a provincial outsider, a scholarship charity case. This period was one of profound loneliness and intense humiliation. His only refuge was his studies, and his profound isolation forced him to develop a powerful internal life. He poured himself into mathematics, geography, and history. His passion for history was particularly focused on great commanders of the past, like Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar, men who rose to power through sheer will and genius, a clear blueprint for his own subconscious aspirations. He also became an ardent admirer of Paoli and an intense anti-French nationalist. He was a small, dark-skinned boy, often bullied, but quick to anger, possessing a sharp temper and an explosive pride. At Brienne, he demonstrated exceptional proficiency in mathematics, which was the core discipline for artillery officers. Artillery was traditionally considered a less glamorous branch than the cavalry or infantry, but it demanded intelligence, technical skill, and precision, not merely aristocratic lineage. This suited Napoleon perfectly. He excelled in the objective merits of the subject, finding solace in the cold, hard logic of ballistics and geometry, a stark contrast to the emotional volatility of his surroundings. His final report from Brienne highlighted his exceptional theoretical knowledge and his reserve, but also noted his proud, difficult, and argumentative temperament. In 1784, Napoleon was accepted into the prestigious École Militaire in Paris, the highest military academy in France, located near the Champ de Mars. This was an enormous honor, a validation of his intellectual gifts. His time in Paris was short and formative. He immersed himself in the library, expanding his knowledge of philosophy, strategy, and literature. It was here he encountered the works of Rousseau and the classical historian Plutarch, deepening his republican and classical ideals. The following year, tragedy struck. His father, Carlo, died of stomach cancer, leaving the family financially vulnerable. As the eldest surviving son, Napoleon felt an immense burden of responsibility for his mother and his 7 siblings. This event deepened his seriousness, his sense of duty, and his ingrained pragmatism.
He requested an early examination and graduated from the École Militaire after only 1 year. The required course usually lasted 2 or 3 years. He graduated 42nd in a class of 58 cadets and was immediately commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Lafayette Artillery Regiment. From 1786 to 1789, Napoleon served in various garrison towns, including Valence and Auxonne, a period marked by tedium and poverty. His salary was meager, and he spent much of it sending funds back to his family in Corsica. He continued his intense self-education, reading voraciously, often on meager rations. He was obsessed with writing essays and short stories, expressing his youthful radicalism and deep frustration with the social system and the French monarchy. He wrote pamphlets advocating Corsican independence and corresponded with Paoli. When the French Revolution erupted in 1789, Napoleon was an immediate enthusiastic supporter. He saw the revolution not merely as a political change, but as a profound societal upheaval that perfectly aligned with his republican ideals and, crucially, offered a meritocratic path for ambitious young men like himself. He spent much of the early years of the revolution cycling between his duty stations on the mainland and political activities in Corsica, attempting to establish himself as a leader in the new political landscape there. However, his unwavering allegiance to the radical ideals of the revolution increasingly put him at odds with his former hero, Paoli. Paoli, who favored a more conservative course and a pragmatic break from the radical elements in Paris, saw Napoleon's ambitions and revolutionary zeal as a betrayal of the true Corsican spirit. The final break came in 1793, when Paoli sided against the French Republic. Napoleon made his decisive choice. He chose the revolution over his beloved Corsica. His family was forced to flee the island under threat of death. Their home was burned, and they were permanently exiled to the mainland to settle in Marseille. This act of exile was the final crucible. It stripped Napoleon of his emotional ties to his homeland and his youthful nationalist dreams. It forged him into a single-minded servant of the French Republic, a man with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. His survival, and the survival of his entire family, now depended solely on his success within the French military structure.
His talent, his ambition, and his Corsican outsider mentality were now channeled entirely into the service of his new mistress, the Revolution. The stage was now perfectly set for the events at Toulon. By the autumn of 1793, Napoleon was back in France, a man hardened by isolation, fueled by revolutionary passion, and driven by the desperate necessity of providing for his family. He was a brilliant but obscure artillery captain, utterly dependent on the meritocracy of the Republic. The siege of Toulon was simply the opportunity his intense preparation and fierce ambition had been waiting for. The moment the exiled outsider would demonstrate his genius to the nation that had previously scorned him. His journey from the noisy streets of Ajaccio to the competitive halls of Paris had prepared him for the solitude of genius and the sudden weight of command. He was ready to seize his destiny.